What's going on with the dollar? What's going on with the Chinese attitude to it? Kind of how much are we in the early stages of something significant here?
I think we've been sliding this way for a very long time. As you can see from your chart, the Chinese has pursuing this basket of weakness, even into a relatively stable dollar CNH. And overall, I think we are preempting the move from Fed in December. As you said, 70% likelihood of the hike coming in. And I think Fed is doing it to gain credibility, not because they're supported by economics data. And I think it's going to be raising the potential for recession in the US, certainly if Mrs. Clinton and her relatively more of the same policy of Obama continues.
How high is the probability of recession in the States now? I'm just trying to understand what the rate path looks like.
So I think depending on how you do it in a multi-factor model, it's probably 35, 50. Range, but I think the ability, the strong dollar is a tightening of the fiscal stance into a growth which has been less than 2.25% every single year since the great financial crisis started. This is not a bumper growth. This is not trying to contain inflation. This is merely on the basic of they want to gain and regain some credibility in terms of moving when they promise to do so.
Steen, you were just talking about how the dollar yuan is being affected. Guy mentioned that, look, at a trade-weighted basis, we're seeing euro weakness. That's keeping perhaps it less of an issue when you look at the trade basket for the yuan. On my screen, we're seeing at the moment how the euro has actually fallen well below the forecasts for the end of the year, which is 1.10, so $110, and we're below that now. Is the euro going to keep on giving up?
I think it will continue to grind itself lower, exactly because the policy divergence that is in the world today is massive. I mean, the U.S. insists on having a trajectory. Fed Evans, as you said in the news this morning, is looking for 3 hikes through 17. Of course, I mean, they looked for 4 this year, so they're always wrong, but that's another part of the story. But certainly we have this. And then I think the major change that we've seen, Caroline, is the fact that someone like Bank of Japan is now pursuing a totally different policy. In my opinion, we're actually going to see helicopter money across the board. And I think Japan will start it. I think Europe will follow through. And I think US, for once, will be lagging behind in terms of doing the helicopter money and its impact. So I think into this environment, I do think that the US will lead in terms of the strength. And unfortunately, that is, in my opinion, everything. The direction of the dollar for the next 3 months dictate the return on your portfolio. A stronger dollar will mean less return, and a weaker dollar will potentially be able to support these relatively large and expensive valuations we see in the world.
It's all about the buck. You bring up what's happening in Chicago. So, as Steen says, Chicago Fed President Charles Evans says it may be appropriate for the central bank to raise rates 3 times by the end of 2017 if the economy continues to grow in line with his current forecast. Evans holds a vote on the FOMC, remember, next year, and he says the Fed needs to be more clear about how the data will affect the decision-making process, i.e. the reaction function. He also weighed in on the prospect of rising inflation.
Any investor who's putting their money out there for some period of time knows that the biggest risk is that if inflation goes up and I'm not compensated for it, I'm going to get killed. So they demand some ex-ante compensation, and that's what's trying to be measured in those financial market prices. And nobody's demanding that type of compensation. Now, there are other things going on, but you know, like high demand for safe assets, but inflationary pressures are hard to find.
If I don't get compensated for rising inflation, I'm going to get killed. The words from Chicago. Let's show you some inflation charts. Let's talk about what is happening in this world of inflation. And if you've got a longer-term time frame, if you're a little older, then you may appreciate this is still relatively low inflation by historical standards, but kind of it's about the Irish joke. It's kind of where we start from here. So inflation's starting to rise. We're certainly seeing that pickup coming through in the UK, but this channel is starting to turn. Or is it? Or are we just going to basically get back into the kind of 1.5 area that we occupied for so long? Steen Jacobsen, what is your take? Where does inflation go from here? How worried should we be about it? And am I going to get killed if I don't start to get comp for it soon?
You're going to the elderly gentleman now, huh?
Yeah.
The inflation, in my opinion, is rising, and it will rise significantly higher than we actually price into the marketplace, but not because of the chart you're showing me, but because of the Chinese. As you very well know, the PPI from China has been exporting deflation to the rest of the world for the past 6 years. And this month, it actually turned positive for the first time. And actually, that explains to a large extent why we see a weakening of the Chinese currency. They're trying to compensate basically for the rise in inflation.
I've got your chart. Here's your chart.
Exactly. So it's gone positive this year. And I think that is a major driver of policies to the rest of the world, because as China starts to export inflation back, don't forget a lot of the ability of consumers in the world to maintain disposable income despite falling earning has been the Chinese. The fact that you can get your Chinese produced good cheaper through the import has been a significant part, 50-60% of the reason why disposable income hasn't been eroded. Now this is changing. Now the dynamics is changing in terms of economics. And I think overall, of course, like for like in terms of the core inflation, oil will contribute to a higher CPI. And I certainly think, coming back from Dubai, I am actually pretty sure that we will see the WTI crude trade higher in to the 60-65, which I perceive to be the ceiling right now in oil.